Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit's. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about a game called Battleborn. Why? Why would I talk about that? Well, it's a fairly big upcoming title, but there's a weird situation going on with this, and I have a feeling it's got something to do with Overwatch. So, Battleborn is a game coming from Gearbox, as in the folks that developed Borderlands and the somewhat awful Aliens Colonial Marines. No, I will not let them forget that. It's mostly Randy Pitchford's fault that I won't let them forget that, but hey. And this one has had some publicity behind it, but it's in a weird situation, and I think it's there because of the prominence and popularity of Overwatch, which is sort of dominating the headlines in an emergent genre. Now, the problem with emergent genres is that when you get games that come along that sort of look like they're in that genre, people make the assumption that they are, and they start making direct comparisons. Now, I think, honestly, that Overwatch and Battleborn are not in the same specific subgenre. They are in some more general, broad genres, such as first-person shooter, for instance. They are both that, absolutely. They are both multiplayer first-person shooters, absolutely. Although in this case, Battleborn has a single-player campaign. Worth bearing that in mind, although it is also designed to be played in online co-op. So while it may be a multiplayer first-person shooter, it also has those elements to it. The problem is that there's now an emerging genre that people are calling hero shooter. And the genre is apparently defined by Overwatch at the moment. That's not to say that Overwatch is the only game in it. There are other games that are sort of creeping into it. The problem is that those games are not necessarily similar enough to do a direct comparison. For instance, Paladins, the upcoming game from Hi-Rez. That's apparently a hero shooter. Okay, is it? Hard to say. I don't know if it is. I mean, it's third person for one thing, which makes it quite different. There's a couple of PvE elements that Overwatch doesn't have. Is Battleborn a hero shooter? Well, possibly, but it depends, again, how you define that genre and whether or not you're going to be very specific. And I like specifics. I think specific genre definitions are helpful in making a good purchase decision and knowing what things are. Let me tell you this. Battleborn is definitely extremely different from Overwatch. They share some similarities. Specifically, you have hero classes. Those heroes have preset weapons, and they have abilities. They also have an ultimate ability. That's basically where the comparisons end, because everything else that Battleborn does is very different to Overwatch. Not only that, but it's going to give a profoundly different play experience. And if you're thinking, well, why don't I just play Overwatch? You need to consider that this is not the same game. Overwatch has got a lot of really good stuff going for it, but Overwatch is PvP, straight up. There are no PvE elements at all in the current build of Overwatch, and there doesn't appear to be a plan to put any in. Battleborn has that. A lot of it, in fact. So it's actually much, much easier to compare Battleborn to something like Monday Night Combat or Titanfall, or some of the modes like Man Against Machine in Team Fortress. Comparing it to Overwatch is kind of silly. Why am I saying all of this? Why am I doing this? Because a lot of people are making the comparison, and they're doing it based on incomplete information. They're dismissing the game out of hand, and I think that would be really unfortunate. Because you remember Monday Night Combat? Probably not, because it died. You remember Super Monday Night Combat? Also died. You know which games I really liked? Both of them. Do I want to see another game like that go down the tubes? No, I don't. I think it's a really cool advancement on the genre, and I want to explain to you why that is. So if you're willing to put up with me for a little while, I will do just that. Bear in mind, this is the press beta thingy. So the game is by no means complete. I will be pointing out the bugs that I've experienced and the problems that need to be fixed, and there are certainly plenty of them. But let's have a look at the options menu first and see if there's anything they need to whack in here before launch. So we'll go first to video options. HUD bounding, always nice, and HUD scale. Field of view goes all the way up to 100. 95 is always nice. What's missing? View model. Yes, your field of view can get wide, and that's good. The problem is the view models on many of the weapons in this game are huge and obnoxious. Overwatch level of obnoxious, actually. And I think that that should be changed. Being able to shrink your weapon down and not wasting that part of the screen and having it obscure things, I think is important. And there are some, not all, but some weapon models in this game that are ludicrous. Resolution goes all the way up to 4K, all the common modes available, windowed mode, full screen, borderless, all that is all there. I will say that multiple alt-tabbing, at least on Windows 10 with this build, has caused some problems with this game, including frame rate drops. That was fixed by restarting the client. Just want to make you aware of that. Shadow quality, these are the settings that I've been running on for all of the recordings, so you can bear that in mind. Shadow quality, VSync on or off. Obviously off right now. Frame rate, you can cap it if you like. This is a very Borderlands-esque option. Cap 30, cap 50, cap 60, cap 72, 120, and unlimited. So, basically, you can stop your graphics card from rendering unnecessary frames if your monitor cannot support that level of output. So, it means that it doesn't heat up as much, doesn't get as loud. You don't push it quite as much as you need to. Anisotropic filtering up to 16, bullet decals, foliage detail, texture quality goes to ultra high. You got some ambient occlusion here. Sorry, not AA. AA is available, but unfortunately it is FXAA only, which is definitely an oversight. I'd like to see something better than this. This is outdated now and not very accurate. Depth of field, motion blur off, of course. View distance goes all the way up to ultra high, which actually we... You know, I've actually never noticed the view distance even mattering. I have a feeling it will only matter in the campaign levels because the arenas for the multiplayer are probably small enough where view distance doesn't come into play. That said, I've capped some fools hundreds of meters away with sniper rifles in the single-player campaign, or the co-op campaign, so I'm kind of surprised that that was not on maximum, but there you go. So performance on those levels is totally fine. I've had no performance drops at all outside of that one set of problems that, as I said, I think it was generated by excessive alt-tabbing and it was fixed by a restart. Bear in mind, of course, this is not the finished product. Okay, audio options, all the music, that's always nice to see. Subtitles on or off, different speaker setups, love that, love this. Even a nighttime setup, which is lovely. You can even set speaker angles if you happen to have the external speakers. Battleborn Battle Chatter, not Batter Chatter. Batter Chatter is what you have in a fish and chip shop. Push to talk, on or off, and mute audio and focus loss. Always nice if you are in a queue and want to alt-tab out and wait for something to happen. Nothing really missing here that's immediately obvious as far as I'm concerned. Although, what you might be noticing in the video options is that it does not appear to have any sort of colorblind option, which can be a little bit of a problem. I believe, however, it is nestled away in another menu. I'm going to try and find it. You see the team colors right here. You can do some of this. It's not ideal, but it's definitely very, very helpful. So if you're red-green colorblind, you can change these options around. Usually you would find these in the video options, which is why it's a little bit nestled away, but thankfully, if you find them, you're good. Just for the benefit of our color-deficient viewers, I'm actually going to change ally team to orange, and I'm going to change enemy team to blue. Which I know is a little bit weird, but pretty sure that should help. In before I've actually picked another one of the three major color deficiencies. Possibly. Now, what you have here is a bunch of gameplay options that let you toggle aim on or off. Aim assist is only on controller, so you don't need to worry about that. Automatic weapon recovery, if you don't want it to return to its original position, you can turn this off if you want more control over your guns. Please bear in mind, this is a shooter. Some people might be calling it a MOBA or a Dota clone. It's not. It plays like a shooter. 100%. This is not Smite. This is not Paragon. It's a first-person shooter. Sprint toggle on or off. Always nice to have the toggle options. Do like that a lot. And you can change your skill activations to instant, quick, and standard. So press to aim, then click again. Hold and release, or single press. This is great for aiming skills that have things like area of effect, circles on the ground, cones, etc., etc. So it does have skills. Don't get me wrong. It has the skills like an Overwatch game. It has the skills like a Dota or a League of Legends or a Smite. But it's got guns, and they are real guns. Well, no, they're not. They're actually completely fake. But you get the idea. Some of them aren't even guns at all. Some are owls. And everyone's fond of owls. Swords as well. I like those. Keyboard and mouse. Mouse smoothing is off by default. We love that. Key bindings available. Pretty much binds pretty much anything you want, really. So, can you use mouse 4? Yes, that's always my good test as to whether or not the game is well configured. Yep. The only thing I would like here are mouse alternative buttons. It doesn't appear to have that. Otherwise, everything is totally fine. Anything abundantly clear, conspicuous by its absence? Nah, not especially, no. Nice to be able to change HUD scale. Not a lot of games let you do that. I think the only big thing is a proper anti-aliasing that isn't FXAA. I'd like that. And view model scaling. Outside of that, though, game seems to have everything it needs. Alright, So, what are you going to be doing in this game? Well, you have a character level, and you have certain characters which you can unlock. All of the characters are available in the game for free. The game currently has no microtransactions. It's not expected to have them because it is a $60 full-price release. And you might be thinking, why would I pay $60 for a multiplayer-only game? Well, one, Rainbow Six Siege says hi, and two, it's not a multiplayer-only game. It has a full campaign. So bear that in mind. So right here, you see our Battleborn. These are different characters that are available. Some of them are locked, some of them are not. That is a bird with a rocket on its arm, because of course it is. That is some kind of anime robot. That is a very upset woman. Not really sure why. Maybe it's because of the dress. I wouldn't blame her. She looks a little silly. El Dragon! That is quite literally a Lucha Libre wrestler. Frickin' awesome looking tank of some sort with a shield and sword. Kind of bounty hunter fellow. This guy is in a very ornate suit and is a skull and hates everything, which is quite cool. You might be noticing that there's a very large variety in characters. I will spin them around so you can have a look. There you go. This is one of the most diverse and interesting lineups I've seen. In fact, I'd say it's competitive with Overwatch in that regard. It's a little bit ridiculous, and there is solid lore behind this. In fact, there are lore challenges for each of these characters, which give you experience and explain who they are. They're also fully voice acted, which is going to be a strength or a weakness, depending on whether or not you like the Borderlands style of humor, because this game is that. There is Melka. This is a mushroom. Some sort of Zen mushroom. He is... well, I mean, if he doesn't do well in the Battleborn, he's going to get a career in professional wrestling, I'll tell you that for a fact. I believe this character is actually voiced, if I recall correctly, by the same voice actress that was behind Tiny Tina, so... which is pretty cool. If I click on this character, it's going to show you all the skills available. Tells you what she is. She's a rogue attacker. She's agile. She's a skirmisher. She's pretty easy to play, apparently. And she's got a passive. Usually, every character has a passive, a weapon, sometimes two, and talents, and then skills. And as you level these guys up in-game, yes, you can do that, which is another big difference from Overwatch. You will be able to pick mutually exclusive talents, which are in a tree kind of like Heroes of the Storm. So it's a nice quick pick. Usually it's one of two, but you can unlock a third one for certain tiers. And that's going to change how you play. You do this via the Helix. The Helix, as you can see here, goes all the way up to level 10. You will level up in-game. These levels only last the length of the game. And these mutation unlocks right here will give you additional options at certain ranks. So let's say rank 5. All right, I can either reduce the cooldown, increase the cooldown reduction effect, in fact, of this skill, or activating the Shadow Fire Pillar will reduce Nullify's cooldown. So you can pick which of these you like. This is base damage on these skills here. Increase the damage of all skills. Increase the lifesteal of all skills. So this is going to affect how you perform. Appearance. She's got some pretty awesome taunts, if you hadn't already noticed. In fact, all of the characters actually do. They're very, very well fleshed out. They've got excellent personalities, and they're really well designed visually, as far as I'm concerned. Different skins available. You unlock these as you go. Again, no microtransactions here. Bear that in mind. These are our lore challenges, which is going to explain who this person is. And you're going to be able to gain information that way. Alright, so that explains, I suppose, the characters. But what about gear? Have you seen gear up here? And you're probably immediately going to say to me, as soon as I mention this gear system, but didn't you hate Paragon's gear system? Yes, I did, but there are reasons for that this game does not do. So, gear. You are able to take in up to 3 pieces of gear into a match. So, you get them from this gear bank. These gear bank slots are filled up by opening loot packs. Let's open one, so I can show you what's going on. I'm just going to open a straight-up common loot pack right here. You cannot buy these with real money. Okay, cool, that's out of the way. Let's open a loot pack. Alright, so we've grabbed one. We're going to go back. Here is our loot pack. We're going to open it, see what's in. Bum, bum, bum. And we get 2 common items. We get Exo Greaves, which is movement speed, and we get Metabolic Failsafe, which is a shield recharge delay. You'll notice at the bottom, they have an activation cost. This is in-game currency that you collect during the match to activate these items. If you don't activate them, they don't do anything. Alright, so we can now add these to our bank. There we go. And you'll notice the 3 loadouts that I have here. This is a loadout specifically for gunners. So I have one that has reload speed, the ammo butler. I have shield penetration and recoil and health regeneration. You can only take 3, and you can't take multiple items of the same type. The items do have rarities, as you probably noticed here. This is a rare. This is blue. So this actually has a disadvantage. A lot of the rares tend to have a downside, and there's also epic and legendary level stuff, but I haven't had any of that yet. So this is quite powerful, but it's more expensive. So I can take items that are really cheap and activate them very quickly, or I can take items that are more expensive and activate them later and risk not being able to activate them at all. And that is how they balance it. Paragon doesn't have that. Not only that, but Paragon's system requires you to define your entire build before you even go into the game. These items, as you can see, they help, but they don't define my build. They just buff up aspects of it. That's the big difference between the two. Not only that, but what's very interesting about this game is that you don't have to buy these items in-game at all, and you can still be competitive. Of course, in a game like Paragon, particularly, but also things like Dota and League of Legends, if you don't buy items for your character, you're boned. You just can't fight. And Paragon is maybe the worst example of that, because if you've seen how that game works, you don't get to choose your items in-game. You have to pick them beforehand in a deck that you acquire randomly through card drops. So you can't necessarily even get the optimal setup, and even if you do, you might end up with the wrong items for the situation if the game takes a weird turn. This game doesn't have any of those problems. These are just nice bonuses, and as I said, you don't have to buy them because there are other things to spend it on. Those things to spend it on, well, I think it's best that I show you. I'm going to show you a match in Meltdown mode, which is one of the game modes available. It is a kind of push map setup. And I'm also going to show you the single player and or co-op campaign. Hopefully, once you've watched this, you're going to understand what Battleborn actually is. You're going to stop comparing it to Overwatch, and you're going to kind of judge it on its own merits. And then you can figure out whether or not you actually want to play it. Cool. All right, let's jump first into Meltdown. This is a 5 versus 5 multiplayer mode that I recorded earlier. Alright, here we go, folks. So I'm playing with the developers here simply because there aren't a huge number of people in the press early access right now, so it's often easier just to find them. And I'm going to let the game explain exactly how this mode works.
Meltdown. Earn points by guiding your minions to designated incinerators and destroy enemy minions before they reach their own. The bigger the minion, the more points you'll earn by sacrificing it. The first team to reach 500 points achieves victory.
The other guys will be killed!
There we go, nice simple explanation of how this game mode actually works, and in the background you heard one of the two, I suppose you could call them trash compactors in the US or something like that. They are trash compactors, but they think they are literal gods of hellfire for some reason, and they have their own personalities. It's a very Gearbox game. If you've already noticed that, I imagine you will not be surprised. If you haven't, you're gonna figure it out as you go along. That's one of them over there, actually, right? In front of us. It will not shut up. So, Minrek needs to be fed. If we feed our minions to that one over there, we're gonna get points. If they get their minions to ours, then they're also going to get points. It's as simple as that. Little bit of a play on the classic kind of tower defense. But of course, this is a PvE and PvP hybrid, which you probably already noticed. Now, the character I'm playing right now is primarily a melee stealth character. As you can see, she's got a couple of different abilities. She also believes that she is a teenage detective. Why? Nobody knows, but whatever parasite is attached to her clearly does not agree and is very annoyed by the whole affair. Actually makes the characterization great. I'll touch more on that later, because I think that they've actually hit it out of the park in terms of a really cool, diverse, and varied and funny cast of really original characters. So what am I doing right now? Well, I'm running around and trying to figure out what's going on. In the other lane, there are a couple of enemy heroes, because, of course, while there is PvE in this, just kind of like a Dota game, or maybe even like something like Monday Night Combat or Titanfall, there are also enemies to kill, which is exactly what I'm going to go and try and do. So I'm trying to grab hold of her. I'm going to try and kill her with the boomerang, which is my secondary. I do miss it, unfortunately. I cloak. Try and catch her, but it looks like I'm not going to be able to do that. So my primary attack is this swipe, as you can see right here. And the melee characters vary a little bit. Some have combos, some just have regular swipes. And of course, I've got that right mouse button secondary boomerang attack and a couple of different cooldown-based abilities, one of which is a cloak. And you may have seen at the start of the game, there was a little helix thing at level 1 where I picked a talent, basically. And that talent buffed up my cloak, and it created an aura of fire around it, so I can actually hurt people by moving close while invisible. I got murdered there. Okay, what else do you need to know? Well, if you look down to the bottom left right there, you'll see a little yellow thing that's about to increase. There we go. Those are shards. You know, I was talking about shards earlier. Remember I was talking about how the gear system worked? Well, if you check over to the right, I now have enough shards to activate a piece of gear that I took into the loadout. I can do it. I can afford it. That item's going to give me a bonus that lasts until the end of the match. So, it's pretty cool to get that bonus quite early on, right? Because you gain an advantage over your peers. Well, here's where the little inherent genius, actually, of the gear system comes in. The way that you level up is, of course, dictated by a variety of factors, but one of the biggest ways to gain experience is to build deployables on the map. You see that thing right in front of me? That's an accelerator. That can be destroyed and rebuilt, and then it can be upgraded as well. That also costs shards. Here's the thing. Buying gear doesn't level you up. Buying deployables does. So you're in a situation where you have to make a choice. Do you build defenses in order to level up quicker and also defend your team's assets, or do you buy gear to give yourself an immediate boost in power? That's why I was saying during the start of the video when we were discussing gear that it was actually possible to run without gear at all and still be competitive, which is a super smart move because it means that those who are just starting out that don't have access to as much gear as others are still going to be able to play at a decent level. Super important as far as I'm concerned. I really do object to some of these progression systems that start you on a lower tier than other players and start you off at a disadvantage. I think that that is very unwelcoming, not to mention ridiculously imbalanced and shouldn't actually be encouraged. I like the fact that Gearbox looked at it and said, look, you know, people love getting gear, but there's this inherent problem where if you have more gear than somebody else, you're more powerful, and people don't like that feeling of imbalance. Of course they don't. How do we fix it? Apparently this is the way. Now that's not to say that the system is fully balanced, because I don't play at a high enough level, nor have I played enough to know whether or not at the high tier one is more powerful than the other objectively. It's entirely possible that one might be, but I like the way they're going with it. If they can balance that system, then they can please pretty much everybody while making sure that newer players are not at an inherent disadvantage from the very start. Alright, we're gonna murder that. Get on him. There we go. So that is Marquis. He is a gentleman robot sniper, and I tore his face off because, of course, I did. That's what my character's pretty good for. You might even notice in the corner, it even gives you a nice little award based on how you kill them. So I actually killed him mid-air there, I think, so I got an in-flight bonus. Now, what you're probably noticing here is that this appears to be a first-person shooter. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. This is not Smite. This is not Paragon. This is a full-on FPS. Oh, there's the catch in the mid-air swipe. Lovely. It is like Overwatch, a real first-person shooter. Now, obviously, demonstrating that with a character that doesn't have a gun is maybe not ideal, but I've got some co-op campaign footage coming for you later in this video that should demonstrate nicely just how much of a first-person shooter it is, with long, long fire distance, big view distance, and 100 yards away sniping. That's what differentiates it in many ways from most of the games on the market here, because some people are going to be saying, well, this is a MOBA, this is a Dota clone, and they'll only be partially right. It's a full-on hybrid. It takes ideas from Titanfall, the idea that minions are important to victory, but the PvP combat is still the central theme. It also takes the idea that you have to earn things, which is, again, something that Titanfall did when it came to earning the Titan. It takes a lot of ideas from Monday Night Combat, which was a third-person shooter, not a first-person shooter, but that was a game that also had Dota-like elements, these PvE aspects. It had buildable deployables and learnable skills as you leveled up in the match, but it was primarily a PvP game behind all of that. Overwatch is only a PvP game, and of course, as a result, you can't really compare the two completely. There are definitely aspects you can talk about when it comes to comparisons as to how good the first-person shooter aspect actually is, how diverse is the character roster, how cool are the characters, how great are their abilities, but things like leveling up, the purchase of gear, the purchase of deployables, the PvE elements, they all go to differentiate it from Overwatch. I think by this point you should have very clearly realized that they are not the same game. And there you go. Cool. Now we've got that out of the way, we can look at the problems and, of course, the advantages of this particular format. I don't know if you've noticed yet, but I really, really like Battleborn. I think that it's bringing not something completely new to the table, but it's reviving something that previously died. That being the idea of the PvE, PvP, Monday Night Combat style hybrid game. That is a freaking mouthful. Someone's got to come up with a better acronym. This kind of game is outside of the actual MOBAs and Dota clones, not a genre that really exists right now. And of course, the problem with those games is that they're more focused on gear, they're more focused on the PvE as opposed to the PvP, although of course PvP is a big central theme to Dota and LoL. Nobody's going to doubt that, but you can't play those games and solely play PvP. You have to farm. It's gotta happen. They're more focused on item builds, and most importantly, more than anything, thank you, stats are king. That is what determines the majority of your effectiveness. Doesn't matter how good a player you are, if you don't have the stats from the items and the levels, you are not going to be able to do anything. Battleborn's not like that. The gear and the levels, they power you up, but not so much as to completely dominate the effectiveness of your character. It's about tweaking and customization and filling a role, as opposed to relying purely on items and stats for your damage. You know, this is a skill-based game in the same way that a first-person shooter would be. Because it is a first-person shooter, obviously. Like, that has become abundantly clear by watching it. Kind of gushing right now. And the reason I'm gushing is because I loved Monday Night Combat, and I was very sad to see it go under. I also like Titanfall a lot. And of course, I like games that do things a little bit differently. I think it was like Natural Selection, or Savage, or Nuclear Dawn, those kind of things, where they take one genre and they meld it with another to create something new and interesting. I like the levels of complexity and the player choice that's provided by doing such a thing. There we go, I built myself an accelerator. That got me experience, and of course it helps our minions because it moves them faster and slows our opponents down. Pretty damn awesome, right?
Hostile giant minion en route to the enemy altar.
Uh-oh. Well, that's good for us. If I escort that giant minion to the enemy altar, which is that right there, then we will get points. You see the score up to the top right there. As we reach halfway, it's going to move the altar. So we have to fight in a different part of the map, which means the map doesn't end up getting too samey. It's pretty cool. But the game ain't perfect. Not at all. There's definitely some work that needs to be done. The biggest problem that I feel affects the whole game, as you may have noticed, is how much of a damn blinding color riot it is. Now, this mode is not as crazy as Incursion, which is a bigger PvE, PvP mode that has even more minions on the map, and it's bonkers. It's already quite hard to see what's going on in Meltdown. It's way harder in Incursion. The problem is you've got a very bright color palette, you've got some extremely impactful particle effects, and it's almost as if the game is insisting on trying to blind you at every possible opportunity. It can get really bad, because initially when you start playing this game, it's really easy to get somewhat confused. Like, oh god, where am I going? What is my role? What am I supposed to do? The minimap is not fully fleshed out yet. So while you can see the objectives here on the minimap, absolutely, things like deployable areas are only indicated as tiny little dots. Not to mention, I believe on this map there's a place where you can spawn those large minions for shards, but it's not indicated on the minimap, so unless you know the map, you don't know where it is. Now, that would be a very easy fix. Just changing those little dots to indicators of what they are, like the accelerator. Maybe put a lightning bolt there. If it was a mortar turret, then, you know, do the icon of a mortar. Not particularly difficult, but that's not in there yet. So those two things contribute. That color riot, that lack of clarity, the fact that the screen is just often far too busy with the subpar minimap makes it confusing until you really learn what's going on. And it's still pretty confusing even then. It's easy to have your target obscured by huge particle effects. And of course, in a first-person shooter, I don't think you should be doing that. Overwatch has this problem. Battleborn's even worse. I will say that. This could be fixed by making sure that the graphics options allow you to tone these things down, or implementing what I would call a competitive preset, which tones down most of the particle effects to ensure that you have optimal vision of what's going on at any given time, and that you're not being blinded by pointless explosions and colors often so obnoxious that it looks like somebody ingested 5 rainbows and then vomited them all over the walls. I get the aesthetic. I get what they're going for here. It's a very Borderlands-esque aesthetic. The sort of graphic novel, cel-shaded, cartoony, exaggerated look to it. And it looks good. I mean, I love the character design. As I said, it is excellent. It's fantastic. They're truly unique in many ways, and that's wonderful. I see characters of different shapes and sizes, and most of them aren't even bloody human. Wonderful. Awesome. I love that level of choice. It's fantastic. So don't change the aesthetic, but for God's sake, we need some toning down on the amount of color, please. Oh. So one of the other problems I've run into during the preview build is that the netcode isn't ideal. This character in particular has a huge problem with that, and it seems to depend kind of on the day, because during this recording I didn't have a huge amount of it, but during a different playthrough when I was playing this character, what was happening was I'd use my grab ability to bring the enemy in so I could hit them, but then they'd vanish and reappear somewhere else. And I thought, do they have a blink? Well, no, because it happened with multiple characters. What was actually happening was the netcode couldn't keep up with the fact that I'd suddenly moved this character from point A to point B with ability X, and as a result, it made them disappear and reappear where it thought it was. That made the ability basically useless. So that's a huge problem with that particular character and anything that seems to have a grab, and that obviously needs to be refined. Since this is an online game, not a land-based game, that has gotta be solved. You see, kind of right there, what happened was I grabbed him, but it actually pulled him behind my character model, which shouldn't have happened, so I had to quickly turn around to try and get him, and of course by that point he could have very easily vanished. So therein lies the obvious problem. That's not as severe as I've seen it before, but that's definitely something that exists. So yes, there is definitely a problem with that. I will also say that the incursion mode, while being very fun, tends to drag on in a huge way. I don't know if that's due to a lack of skill on our part. It certainly dragged on with the bots, but I have a feeling that's because of the bots' lack of competence. You have to do a very big concerted push in that mode, because that mode is about overwhelming 2 giant sentry robots, which will murder you if they lock onto you. It's like a tower on steroids. If you don't have creeps to tank and take their shields away, not only will it murder you, but it will give you the middle finger and insult you while doing so. I'm not kidding, that actually happens. And you know what? That's one of the great things about this game. It's got a killer sense of humor. It revels in the fact that it's competitive. You can taunt. In fact, it encourages you to taunt when you kill somebody because it'll appear on the death cam. It literally says in the corner, taunt now. It loves that idea. It embraces it. All of the characters are sassy in their own way. They've all got their own unique taunts and insults, and none of them take crap from anybody. Hell, again, the NPCs don't take crap from anybody. The altar is literally shouting at you. The game's got attitude. Serious attitude. That's not a word that I use to describe things all that often, because I think it's overused. And a lot of games try and say, yeah, we're awesome, we're cool, we're rad. Does anyone say rad anymore? Am I old? Who knows? I think that this game actually truly has that, and it's so welcoming to me. It's so amusing, it makes me smile. I love that. The game's level of mechanical complexity, I think, becomes obvious as you play these modes and you figure out the different nuances, you figure out the different timings. When do I upgrade? What abilities do I take? I can adapt my build mid-match if it's not working out all that well. When do I buy particular pieces of gear? When do we push for the creep camps? Because incursion mode has mercenaries. You know, when do we go for those so that we can get the mercenaries to help our push? When do we time our pushes? When do we feint? When do we take the other lane? You know, very much strategies and things that are core to the Dota or MOBA experience. And yet, this is a first-person shooter. It's a great melding of the two. Oh god, let's get the hell out of here. That's terrible. Ah! Too late. Oh, that's quite sad. The game is easy to get into, although it's definitely intimidating, especially in the more complicated modes, because there's so much going on at any given time. It does do a decent job of giving you a tutorial, and also the narrator, as you probably figured out, the match announcer, gives you prompts saying, hey, a giant minion's here, you better probably escort that. In the other modes, like, oh, we've got a big push. Not only that, if you kill multiple people, it'll say, power play, half the enemy team is dead, which is a great prompt for everybody to push. So if people listen to what the announcer is saying, that's very helpful, even if you're a newer player, to guide you in what you're doing. I think that's a great addition to the game, something that a lot of Dota-style games do not have, and as a result, people get a little bit confused about when to do certain things. That's not to say the tutorial is perfect, it's not, and as I said, the terrible minimap probably has a lot to do with that. And it would be nice if they were able to emphasize what you should and should not be doing there. But what if you don't want to play this competitive multiplayer? Well, as it turns out, the game kind of has you covered there, because it has a full co-op campaign that they're releasing in episodes. The episodes will be free, and it's going to be a continuing story that fleshes out the lore of all the characters in the world, and it also gives you a full-on mission-based experience. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about.
You smell terrible.
Apologies for the hike, but trust me, you're better off on foot. Forensic portals of this magnitude have a dizzying effect on AI, and... oh dear, the portal's surging! Brace yourself, Nova! Woo!
Welcome to the co-op campaign. I'm playing a 2-player co-op with Dex Bonus, aka Press Heart to continue. I am playing Marquis, who is that robot sniper from earlier. He also has owls, many owls, and she is playing Arendelle, who is sort of a kind of psychopathic 4-armed witch thing. It's... I don't even want to know at this point. It's awesome. That's all I know for a fact. So this is a full-on mission. This is not wave-based nonsense. This is not an arena or anything like that. This is a full-on level. It's fully designed. You run through the whole damn thing. And what do we got here but a base? Let's get out my trusty brass sniper rifle and start to pick them off. As you might notice, Marquis is a little bit of a sniper, no doubt. His rifle can be used as a pistol at shorter range, and he has owls. The owls not only scout, but they attack anything they're close to. And he's got this sort of aura thingy that slows people down. And a giant laser, which we'll show you later. So, we're fighting into the base. You know, this probably reminds you a little bit of Borderlands, except things are dying in one shot, which is quite nice. There are definitely bullet spongy enemies in this, but we're talking giant robots, aliens, and things with shields. I've talked about the idea of the dissonance between theme and the toughness of characters. This is not the case in this one. In fact, I actually say that outside of the bosses, for obvious reasons, because they're 500 feet tall, the minions die at a relatively good pace. It's actually less bullet spongy than co-op in Borderlands. I don't know how it gets with more players, because you can play with more than 2 people. So it may get worse at that point, but we found that 2 people was actually a really good balance, and stuff was dying just fast enough for it to feel good. Now, you might notice that we just walked past some power-ups there. The really cool thing about this mode is that not only can you grab a bunch of power-ups to make yourself more powerful, but you can earn credits, and those credits can not only be spent in this mode to upgrade certain things, but they can also be converted later into credits that you can use to buy packs for your multiplayer character. You can also find hidden loot, and that loot will be put into your bank to use in multiplayer competitive. That's a great little synergy. If you want to play a lot of co-op, awesome. By the time you finally decide to go into competitive mode, you're probably going to be pretty well geared out, which is nice. You can earn character ranks and experience in this mode, which is fantastic. So those of you who are a little bit intimidated by the competitive mode, you don't have to go right into it. And as you can see, this co-op mode is actually just surprisingly well fleshed out. When I heard about co-op, what I expected was, it's going to be wave-based horde stuff. No, it's a fully voiced, properly scripted story that you go the whole way through. And like I said, it's got a giant boss fight at the end of it. And I'm going to show it to you. Oh, yes. So this is reasonably fun. Pacing-wise, it may be a little bit off. You know, there might be possibly a few too many enemies to shoot through. And I think the problem with setting up a co-op campaign like this is that the way that the characters are designed in Battleborn is around usually a single weapon and a couple of abilities. Problem with that is if you're using the same weapon over and over and over again, the combat can become samey. That's one of the issues that I have with any game that tries this with the so-called hero classes. You know, a regular co-op shooter probably has multiple guns and multiple ways to fight. In a game like this, when you pick a hero character, it kind of typecasts you into a role. And while, as you can see on the screen, I can get upgrades, which is going to change, to some degree, the way that I fight, it's not going to alter it completely. And I'm still going to be stuck as a sniper. I picked a sniper, that means I'm stuck as a sniper pretty much for the rest of the match. That to me can get samey, and I think that's actually one of the problems that I recently identified with games like this that put me off playing a lot of these co-op modes, simply because of how repetitive they can be when I have that lack of varied combat. In a game like, say, Quake, I've got like 10 different weapons to pick up and a huge variety of different enemies and all sorts of things like that. In a game like this, I'm stuck with this pistol and the rifle for the entire game, plus my little abilities. So that's a criticism, and it's going to be relevant to some people and not to others. But I want to put that out there and just kind of point it out as a possible flaw in the evolution of the genre. I think it might be something that future games may want to try and address, because I think that it is a little bit off-putting. Outside of that, though, I think the mode's really, really good. You're looking for hidden loot, you're grabbing power-ups, of which you can actually grab all 3 of them, as I thought you only had to choose 1. You can even build stuff. So, in this case, I can build a drone, and I can actually choose which one I want. So I built a repair drone that's going to follow me around. Actually, that's an assault drone, never mind. It's an assault drone that's going to follow me around, and it's going to fight with me. So I spent some of my shards that I gathered on that. There are other things you can do. So let me skip forward a little bit to when this mode starts to get really interesting, when we meet the so-called wolf.
All right, let's get your doomsday device on the ground. Meet Wolf, a heavily modified sentry. The bomb on his back should provide a sizable explosion. One that should collapse the Virilsi portal. It'll kill him in the process, but that won't bother him. I've seen to that. Go on, fire him up.
Howdy, fellas. What's shaking?
Wolf Unit, our target is a Virilsi portal. We need you to hurl yourself into it, detonate, and collapse the anomaly.
Awesome. That sounds both fun and safe. Let's roll, fellas. Knock, knock, fellas. I'm dumb as hell and thirsting for death.
The field is down. Press onward.
This sucks. Help.
Don't forget, Wolf's got all sorts of cool gizmos and doodads you can upgrade on your warpath to the portal. Make use of them. The shard conduit powering that force field can't be far away. Find it and destroy it, but keep an eye on the sentry.
So, it's now an escort mission. And you're groaning at that idea. Oh no, escort missions! I don't blame you. Most of them are terrible. Except when you're escorting a giant spider bot with more firepower than your average planet. So that's helpful. You are able to spend your shards on this guy to give him temporary buffs. So if he's taking damage, or if you're taking damage, he can activate a repair field, which will fix both you and him. You can activate an additional gun, and I believe you can also speed him up a little bit. So we now have to disable this shield in order to get through this, and we discover this is an actual co-op element. One of us has to stand on the pad, and the other player has to give us a boost, basically. Has to stand on the thing to fire us up into an area where we can disable that shield. So that's a pretty cool co-op aspect to it. We didn't quite realize this at first, though. I don't know if the game should tell you that, because it's kind of cool to figure that out for yourself, but we were sort of stuck in this area not really knowing what was going on. I think perhaps they could have maybe done a little bit of a better job prompting what we're supposed to do here. It does say on the side of the screen, destroy shield power source, but do not under any circumstances underestimate how stupid we are. I think it's actually because I didn't know where the shield power source was, and it was a little bit hard to find it on the minimap because I didn't know what kind of indicator I was looking for, but you know, we kind of figured that out eventually. You see one of the jump pads over there, which I believe is going to let my co-op partner do something, so that's pretty neat. I like the mode quite a lot, but I gotta say the best part of it was the boss fight. There were definitely parts of this mode where I was feeling a little bit bored for the reasons that I've given earlier. It can tire itself out just a little bit. However, when we got to the boss fight, I think I saw the potential of this mode, so let me show that to you. This is the Conservator. That's a terrible name for a boss. Oh. I wouldn't say that to his face. Oh, Jesus. So, this boss is gigantic, as you can probably tell, and there are a number of different phases to it. So, he's locked down the wolf robot, so we're kind of screwed there, and we're trying to figure out, at this point, what the hell is going on. How do we hit him? I miss his head multiple times, because his head's quite hard to hit. So I think, okay, I'll just do a little bit of damage to his back. No, I'm doing no DPS at all. what do? So in phase 1, he starts throwing these energy orbs around. I'm going to activate my ultimate, which just put a giant shot into his back, and also grab a little bit of gear so that I can increase my fire rate. There we go. Might as well spend it on something useful. And unfortunately, I believe he's now immune. And the reason is because this is the next phase of the fight. He activates a couple of different minions that power him up. But while doing this, he's also charging a giant end-of-the-world orb destruction thing. If we don't kill those enemies in time, we'll be enveloped by the orb and destroyed, which is exactly what's happening right now. You see the damage I'm taking. We're like, oh god, what's happening? What's happening? We don't even know what's going on. Oh god. Because we suck at paying attention, as it would turn out. We're trying to find the other minion. We're trying to get away from this orb. This orb's going to keep expanding until we kill that. You know what this reminds me of? A goddamn raid boss. You want to know why it reminds me of a goddamn raid boss? Because it basically is a goddamn raid boss. It's a phase-based cooperative boss in which you have to learn the mechanics, understand it, and basically dance to the game's tune. And we still don't know what's going on here. We actually end up dying, which is thankfully fine because I believe we have a couple of lives. I actually think somehow Dodger survived this, probably by using some kind of shielding skill or whatever. And that's thankfully the end of that phase. But it's now happening again. We need to go and do something. All right. Thankfully, the phase is now ended. Let's grab some power-ups and go back into it. This boss fight is fantastic. If any of the other boss fights are like this, then I think that running these bosses is going to be a lot of fun. Plus, the game has multiple difficulty modes and a hardcore mode, which is going to increase your loot drop rates and all sorts of things like that. And if you want a big challenge, well, you can get it. Now, here's what I think right now. This is my conclusion. Right now, while Battleborn is a $60 product, it seems like a complete one. It doesn't seem like it's missing much. Having that co-op campaign and story mode, having that emphasis on lore challenges, having no microtransactions, and having a suite of different multiplayer modes, to me says this game's worth the asking price. Of course, $60 is a lot to ask of anybody these days, and I certainly don't blame you for turning around and saying, well, why don't I just play Dota? It's like, well, it's not the same game, you know? Why don't I just play Overwatch? Well, you can, but I mean, that's a $40 game, and it doesn't have that co-op mode. It doesn't have that element. It doesn't have that PvE aspect. It's not the same game. As you can see now, we're in Phase 3, which teleported us into space, and we're fighting these shadowy beings and trying not to get horribly murdered, which is quite challenging, actually. Battleborn right now, I think, is a unique product on the market. At least when it will be when it comes out, anyway. It combines a lot of different elements that I like. It revives what I think is kind of a dead subgenre in the form of what Monday Night Combat was, and to some degree what Titanfall still is. That PvE PvP hybrid to me is very compelling, especially when paired with a real first-person shooter, and not a Dota style of stat-based, range-limited auto attacks, as well as cooldown-based skills. That makes the game unique. That's what makes the game stand out. Is it perfect? Hell no. As I've said, I think there are some serious things that need to be resolved. And of course, I need to see how it's going to develop in future. Eventually, these modes will get dull. Eventually, there will not be enough story to keep playing. So the hope is that they're able to continue to provide that support. Will they do post-release monetization? I don't know. Will they introduce microtransactions? I bloody well hope not. Is the loot system really balanced? Again, I don't know, because I haven't been able to get that high level to be able to unlock these legendary items and things like that. It may very well be that somebody with these legendaries, despite them being more expensive and harder to activate in-game, will still end up with an advantage over somebody that doesn't have them. The system is good, but it's potentially still exploitable. And it all comes down to how they decide to balance it, whether or not they pull that off. If they do, I think this is a really special game. Myself, Strippin, Dex Bonus, and Cry, and a few others have been playing quite a lot of this, and I think we all really enjoy it. I can't speak for them, of course. Let them speak for themselves on the matter, but they have expressed that they had fun. I had fun playing with them, and I think that the game has a really bright future. And I hope that you pay attention to it. Don't ignore it. That would be a shame. I hate it when these games that have interesting ideas get ignored because they get mistaken for something else. Again, Monday Night Combat was mistaken for Team Fortress 2, so that ended up falling flat on its face. There are other games that have suffered the same sort of fate. Please, you know, don't let that keep happening. I love it when they advance these genres. I love it when they don't dumb them down, or when they are not afraid of having those levels of complexity and potentially confusing people initially. It is entirely okay to do that. It's more than okay. It's what I want now, I think, out of multiplayer gaming. It's a good value package. It's got a lot to offer. and I have a feeling I'm going to be playing it for quite some time. Hopefully the release goes well. Right now, as I said, there's so few people in the preview build that it can be hard to get games. So that's a little bit limiting unless I'm able to get my friends on to play. But hopefully this video has kind of explained what this game is, what I think about it, what I think needs to be improved, and why I think it is actually a very exciting property. As to why it has so little attention at the moment and why so many people on forums are just claiming it's an Overwatch ripoff or whatever, I don't really know. I think maybe it's a failure from the marketing department of Gearbox. Maybe they just have not managed to communicate and make the game resonate with people yet. You know what? That's a constant problem in the games industry. If you don't market your game properly, you don't make it resonate with people, it's not going to sell. I don't think it is right now. I think that needs to be changed. It's not my job to do it, but maybe this video did it anyway, because I think this game has a potentially bright future, and I think it's actually really well put together. Battleborn, ladies and gentlemen, that is my thoughts on the press preview build. It's certainly incomplete. The game will be available for $60 upon its release date. Obviously, that's a little bit pricey, but I think as a value proposition with all the modes and all that variety, that ain't too shabby. Battleborn, ladies and gentlemen, my name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, then by all means, feel free to click the like button. If you disliked it, then dislike is also available for you. And I will see you next time.